Welcome everyone to the 2022 U.S. Benefits Trend Report launch webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us. Before we begin, I wanted to take a moment to let you know that we are recording this session and you will receive the recording tomorrow. As you have questions, you may post them in the Zoom Q&A. However, we will not be responding to questions during this call. At this time, I will hand over the call to Kim Bell, Executive Vice President and Head of Health and Benefits at NFP. Kim, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amber, and thank you to everyone for joining us today for our webinar on NFP's 2022 U.S. Benefits Trend Report. Today with me, I have Sam Zabarji. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher Sam's last name. Sam currently leads digital health efforts with Amazon Care's Growth and Business Development Organization. Prior to Amazon, Sam was Vice President of Digital Health and Innovation at North Shore University Health System, and previously held executive and leadership level roles at organizations including Providence Health, Vodafone, Nokia, and Sprint. Sam's also a three-time founder, CEO, most recently leading Labalytics, a medical diagnostic and testing workflows solution company, and previously leading Medicast, recognized by Becker's as a top disruptive healthcare company, which sold to Providence Health, and Merit AI, which was recognized by the Technology Association of Georgia as a top 40 most disruptive company. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. So for today's webinar, we're going to spend a little time hearing from Sam, and then we will be joined by a panel of NFP subject matter experts along with Sam, and we'll go through some leading questions that pertain to some of the information that you'll find in our trend report when you have a chance to review it. So with that, Sam, I'm going to turn the floor over to you and let you spend the next 10 or 15 minutes talking to the group.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Kim, and hello, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great week so far. As Kim mentioned, my name is Sam Zabarji, and I am the digital health leader here at Amazon Care, a hybrid and in-person healthcare benefit that's available across the United States. I'm coming to you all live from beautiful and sunny Atlanta, Georgia, my hometown of about 16 years now. So first off, many thanks to the NFP team who's graciously invited me to chat with you all today and just spend a few minutes just talking through a few of the things that are going on in the healthcare space. And special thanks to all of you who've tuned in. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here with you to talk about something that's near and dear to every single one of us and a topic that's exceptionally personal, and that's healthcare. And I'm here particularly to discuss what healthcare looks like right now in 2020, 2 years after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and really just how consumer focused it's become and why. But where I want to start is by just going back a little further. If we turn back the clock about a decade, that's the time when, in my view, this notion of consumerization of healthcare really started. And that's where things really began to get going with this group of the worried well, and movements started picking up around personal health and wellness, where a small subset of individuals started to get more interested in their own healthcare journeys and really kicked off this movement. And in my view, this can be attributed to a few things. First was the rise of social media and information sharing online. Second was really around this increased consumption of media of all kinds, and followed by the increased prevalence and permeation of the internet into every single aspect of our lives. And lastly, this trend of gamification in all of our aspects of life as well, including that personal notion of healthcare. And eventually, this innovation in technology really drove to an increase in the prevalence of telehealth, which we all now know and love. But even with the steady increase of interest in virtual services, there really hadn't been this catalyst to serve as a massive accelerant in the space. So COVID-19 came along and the rest was history. Individuals who were historically patients started to become active consumers. They started getting forced into becoming more educated, engaging more with their health, and understanding the impacts of the benefits and the role that their jobs and employers played in their entire health and wellness journey. And people really started to pay more attention to care and all aspects of that, everything from the cost of care to the quality of care, and ultimately the benefits that they were receiving. So individuals really now quarterback their own health and their family's health in a way that they historically never were or had to be doing prior to the pandemic. And so I think everyone on this call, myself included, has seen their own approach to personal health change a significant bit over these last 2 years. For example, one of the things I always like to say is that a couple of years ago, no one would have ever thought we'd be performing our own lab tests at home and sticking swabs in our noses and in the noses of our loved ones, or actively or almost exclusively engaging with providers through technology. And one of the things that we saw was that telehealth saw a nearly 4,000% increase, a 3,800% increase in utilization from a pre-COVID baseline. And that's an incredibly significant statistic if you think about COVID as really this forcing function to get people to adapt to technology that had already been around for many, many years. Now, among the downstream effects of this sudden hyper-awareness on benefits in healthcare has really been this significant driver now around recruiting and employee retention and the focus that's on that now. NFP recently just found that 70% of employers believe that medical insurance is the #1 benefit that needs to be offered to attract and retain talent. That's staggering. It's an incredible statistic. And this has only been accelerated by an increase in health literacy as well, as individuals really become more educated on the languages, the nuances, and the specifics of healthcare. Now, if we again kind of look back in history, we'd see that benefits purchasing had historically been top-down, meaning that HR professionals and benefits buyers would make purchase decisions on an annual or biannual basis, and really truly unilaterally making those decisions. These people have been responsible for selecting a small handful of services that they believed adequately fits the employee's needs. Now, we've seen a little bit of a shift. With this increased awareness and interest in healthcare, many employees are now actually pushing on their HR and benefit teams to adopt new services and offerings. In turn, healthcare organizations that are really hungry for growth have actually latched onto this concept and are aggressively targeting consumers with the hopes that these individuals push on employers to adopt these services. And we've now seen this as part of this emerging model or this phenomenon called B2C2B. Now, this B2C2B model is really forcing employers to think differently and is shifting that annual or that biannual decision-making process to more of a weekly or monthly basis. And there's this big push to continue adapting on benefits and offerings to truly retain those employees, which are so, so critical right now. And among the macro trends, we've seen that healthcare benefits are really no longer one size fits all. And I think that trend is really here to stay. Now, while this consumerization of healthcare has really been on its way for a decade, we're really still in the early innings. We always like to say here at Amazon Care that patients are losing patience. And it's a fact that people have grown accustomed to this, quote, life on demand. And it's everything from Uber to TaskRabbit to 2-hour delivery of groceries and food. And healthcare is really no longer an exception to that rule. And this holds particularly true around millennials and Gen Zers and other generations, many of whom are entering the workforce for the first time ever. And if we look at some of the industry statistics, we see that only 66% of millennials actually have a primary care provider. And as a generation, they're twice as likely as boomers to use telemedicine. And not only that, but that generation is now 3 times as likely to use wearable technology geared at health and wellness. And so this is an incredible trend, such a shift that we're seeing in the employer space and with employees. Then this generational shift is now putting more pressure on the healthcare industry as a whole. And that pressure is really for individuals, organizations to adapt to meet the needs of this huge swath of customers. Now, indirectly, this is starting to push on the pressure valve and is starting to put pressure on employers to provide benefits and care experiences that meet the needs of that next generation, those needs that are changing. And failing to do so is likely to start creating some challenges around recruitment and retention, or really have cost implications if this, quote, on-demand generation starts to choose to go to a convenient, or call it out of network or expensive place of service, such as an emergency room, for all of their basic needs, because they don't have those care offerings that they actually need. Now, factoring in a growing contingency of tech companies becoming health companies is also a growing trend. Over the last few years, we've seen this plethora of companies, about 1,000 technology startups now entering the healthcare market, with many of them focused on digitizing the patient journey and really angling for just a small piece of this multi-trillion-dollar market. But we've also seen another interesting shift. We've seen tech giants like Apple with its Apple Health app and fitness programming, Google with their Fitbits and Care Studio search tool for medical records, and the work they're doing in artificial intelligence, and Microsoft with its growing number of cloud-based products and services and their acquisition of Nuance around voice detection and natural language processing. They have all made significant investments in this space. Now, Amazon's also had its hand in several parts of the industry, having invested in several big areas. Amazon Care, for example, the business that I work for, aims to put the patient at the center of everything we do. So this service is available around the clock, 365 days a year, all through a smartphone. And our customer premise is to deliver care within minutes. So far, we've been able to connect patients to a medical professional in under 60 seconds, about 87% of the time. And if extra care is needed, things like blood draws or labs, or if an in-person exam is necessary, we actually dispatch a nurse out to patients' homes. And then when specialists are needed, our care coordination team works to connect patients with nearby doctors in the network who can solve that issue. So we're aimed at patient satisfaction, but equally importantly is employer satisfaction and the clinician satisfaction. And beyond Amazon Care, the group that I'm in, Amazon has pharmacy, Alexa Health, and more. But really all with this single aim of making healthcare, which is really this increasingly complicated and complex space, making it more patient obsessed and making it simpler. Now, one of the things we always hear is that this plethora of companies, this growing contingency of companies operating in this space has created a significant amount of noise and complexity for employers. And so employers are at this unique crossroads with this moment of opportunity. And that opportunity is really for employers to start thinking about crafting unique benefit packages that can provide differentiation when thinking about attracting and retaining talent, and really driving that greater awareness of the services that are actually offered, and then holding the hands of the employees and shepherding them through to utilize lower cost, higher quality services that are already offered and are already in network and as part of that benefit plan. And more importantly, building that open communication channel to involve the employees in that benefit design process. And this is really, really important because historically, services offered have had very low uptake. We've seen this for many, many years now. And there's many employees that are already using digital tools or healthcare services. So taking the time to understand what the most valuable and highest demand services are and bridging those two conversations together can be exceptionally beneficial. Though we obviously know too many choices and too much change all at once can be exceptionally overwhelming. So in my view, we're currently in history's most exciting moment in the history of healthcare. There's ample room for innovation. There are so many incredible ideas that are taking shape and so many patient-focused solutions that are launching. And it's inspiring. And at the end of the day, it's what's best for the health of patients and ultimately for every single one of us as consumers, as humans worldwide. So with that, again, I'm Sam Zabarjadi with Amazon Care. I wanted to thank you for taking just a few minutes to tune in and hear me out. And with that, Kim, I'll hand it back to you. I think you had some questions for me. And thanks again. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you for being with us. And you did a much better job saying your last name than I could ever do. So
I've had a little bit of practice.
You have had. I'm sure you've spelled that a few times too. So, I do have a couple of questions, Sam. So, this is a challenging time for benefit buyers, both employers and employees, but it's also an exciting time in terms of opportunities in the marketplace. And I think you alluded to, many of the things that are happening right now. How are you seeing benefits buying and influence evolve?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kim. One interesting observation I've had is that employees are now significantly more involved in decisions that are made. I mean, this is such a drastic departure from where we were, as I kind of alluded to earlier. And this idea of consumerization I spoke about has actually transformed individuals or employees from just users of healthcare or even patients. It's transformed them into consumers, into decision makers, and influencers. They're now pushing up and they're actually helping make some of those decisions. So on one hand, this has actually made it easier for benefits buyers because they're hearing firsthand from users on what they desire, which hopefully will ultimately lead to greater uptake of benefits and services that are offered. But it's also a bit of a challenge because the bar for employee satisfaction is now significantly higher. And the industry data is really telling around the things, so necessity of health benefits in recruiting and retaining talent. I mean, we talked about the report from NFP. Some other industry data that I've seen pointed to the fact that 73% of health workers in the US, consider health benefits when choosing a job. 56% of adults state that health coverage is a key factor when they decide whether or not to stay at that job. And so the biggest opportunity here is for employers to figure out how to leverage really what I like to call a usage and feedback flywheel with employees to make sure that they're continuously evolving benefits and driving that employee satisfaction and that those solutions are actually utilized.
Yeah, I think that for those, who've joined us on today's call from the HR, areas, I'm sure it just feels like, a day in, day out challenge. We've had some conversations about the multimodal carousel. What is that and why is it important?
So the multimodal carousel really refers to the ability for patients to receive the most appropriate level of care from the right provider at the most appropriate location and at the most appropriate time. So this kind of goes back to this notion that there isn't and really can't be a single approach to how care is delivered. So we've all come to realize and learn about all the great benefits of telehealth around convenience and ability to scale. But the question is, should that really be the single modality of care that employers offer? Or should it be very binary? Should it be telehealth or just, expensive facilities? So there are a lot of solutions now that are popping up that offer a blend of telehealth with some sort of physical or in-person encounter. And one of the eye-opening learnings that I've had from my time at Amazon Care is just how much value there actually has been across these different modalities of care. Everything from the ability to chat with a nurse to serving up care over video, or sending nurses out to a home that can get that hands-on care and that high touch when needed. But I think this smart approach of navigating patients to that right modality of care, it saves time and space on providers' calendars and schedules in those other modalities of care. It helps patients who actually need those modalities of care to get in at that right time. And at the end of the day, it's great for all the stakeholders across the value chain, right? It's financially helpful. It's great for the providers. It's great for the patients. And I think that holistic approach is why this multimodal carousel and having a strategy around that is so important.
Yeah, I think we're going to, spend some time talking about, different access to care as we talk to our panel in a little bit. But even in terms of being able to get in to see providers and that kind of thing, the telehealth has been instrumental in allowing that to happen, because during COVID, you couldn't, they were not available. But now, there is just a shortage and there's such a need. So, well, last question for you, Sam. We've heard a lot about the increase in telehealth visits over the past couple of years, and many have speculated that those usage trends going forward. What are some of your observations and key takeaways in the telehealth space?
So I think COVID was interesting again, right? We all kind of fall back on this, but the pandemic really pushed us down this path where telehealth became nearly ubiquitous, right? And I think at a macro level, that was a pretty good step forward for the industry, at least when you consider things like the regulatory landscape and financial considerations, and even just the consumer adoption perspective. Despite this return to normal and visits returning to traditional in-office settings, telehealth does actually continue to play a key role in certain segments. One I always like to point to is just behavioral health and therapy. One example I'll share that as the pandemic took off, I was leading digital health and innovation for a 9-hospital academic medical center. And overnight, we went from everything pretty much in office, and then clinics and offices shut down. And there was some serious reticence from a lot of the provider groups and specialties about the efficacy of telehealth. But what we saw was that in the areas of psychiatry and behavioral health and therapy, we saw nearly universal adoption from providers and patients to leverage telehealth. And even as clinics opened up, 99% of those visit types actually remained via telehealth. And patients stated that experience was actually preferred to that in-office visit. And so I think, it's going to kind of be on a per specialty, per encounter type basis, what happens moving forward. But in general, if we take a step back, I think we're in our infancy when it pertains to telehealth. And I really suspect that we'll see some pretty significant evolution when you think about the intersection of traditional telehealth and things like wearable or connected devices, and thinking about how we enrich the overall telehealth experiences and bring more of this hands-on and rich data and that more traditional type of care experience to telehealth. And so for me, what I'm most bullish on is that I'm super excited to see what's coming next in the areas of remote patient monitoring and looking at things like continuous glucose monitoring and wearable cardiac monitoring. So what brings together these video visits with real-time diagnostics, and how can you drive some really rich encounters and experiences that are, again, great for patients and great for providers?
Yeah, those are great insights, Sam, and thank you so much for that. It's clear we're experiencing some major changes in the way we all think about benefits from, I'm an employee and, NFP is an employer, and for all of, the employer clients and prospects out there. Prior to COVID, it was interesting because, I do agree with you. Probably, I don't know the statistic on the percentage of people who probably never used their benefit plans before COVID. And, there became such a need and such a reliance on employer sponsored, coverages and those kind of things. And I think people have definitely taken notice, right? And so they're making that an important part of their decision, as you've said, and the stats show in terms of where they work and what they do. And I've seen a few questions pop up here, about, for telehealth, for example, are we seeing savings when we use telehealth instead of in-person visits and those kind of things? And I think that there's always going to be those kinds of, return on investment types of discussions, right? Employers have to balance that. They've got a certain amount of budget to work with, and they've got to attract and retain employees. So, there's always been, I feel like I've been in benefits since the beginning of time, and there's always been that challenge, right? Rising healthcare costs, all those kinds of things. But I think that, and we're gonna talk a little bit about it as we get to our panel discussion here. But I think we have to start thinking about a return on value, and obviously return on investment factors into that. But I think that you have to look at much more than just, if I offer telehealth, do I save money as opposed to the traditional in-person visit? I think there is more of a return on value approach here in what gap are you looking to close here? Is it just a budgetary gap? Are you looking to create value for your employees? And what is that value worth? So anyway, I think that, we're gonna shed a little more light on that as we jump into the panel discussion. So let's meet our panel. Sam is clearly going to be on our panel for those of you listening. And you've met me. I'm Kim Bell. I'm the head of health and benefits here from a national perspective at NFP. So I work with all of our, health and benefits agencies across the country. I'm also joined today by Deb Smolinski, who is our practice leader in well-being and engagement. Maria Trepanasso, who is our practice leader in all things HR. We call it HR solutions, but all things in that space. Heidi Cottle, who is our practice leader for cost containment strategies. Kim Heald, who's our practice leader in all things VBs, as she calls it, voluntary benefits. And Nellie Rose, who's one of our clinical pharmacists at our RX Solutions practice. So all of these folks, including Sam, that you're going to hear from today, are people who spend all of their time in their particular practices. So we call them subject matter experts, but that doesn't really do it justice in terms of what they know and understand in where we are today, where we're going. You'll see them, mentioned time and again in our trend report, because a lot of the, insights and information in our trend report comes from, these very talented people. So anyway, you see, I think everybody's face on the panel. So we're going to jump right into our first question, and you'll, for those of you listening in, we have, several questions. Each, not every panelist will weigh in on every question. Sometimes one will, sometimes three will. So bear with us. So first question we're gonna talk about is, how does the employee experience fit into the benefits equation? What are some best practices employers can consider to maximize the value of their benefits investments? So our first panelist who's going to address this question is Heidi Cottle from a cost containment standpoint.
Thanks, Kim. Return on value, or ROV, not that we need another acronym in our industry, but it's a little bit different than ROI. And that definition will vary by each organization. It's recommended for companies to define their ROV, which will meet their kind of cultural differences, their environment, their policies, and their business objectives. So once a company defines what their ROV is, then they can put quantitative and qualitative measures around it that can establish and can be established and then monitor and validate performance. In today's challenge, as Sam and Kim both identified, that it's not just recruiting and retention, but it's also rewarding key talent. And so it's not surprising that the top two responses by employers to the benchmarking survey was, number one, limiting member disruption, which is key. And then number two, to improve access to members to an enhanced benefit option. So let me share one of those benefits with you. One benefit solution that is growing in demand and value is, and I'm going to define it very carefully, is concierge level clinical care navigation. And the solution is really designed to address some of the challenges that Sam indicated about guiding members through the complexity of healthcare. And as we all know, all solutions are not created equal. So you want to make sure that your members receive kind of that personalized attention, and that attention from a clinical care navigation or navigator or team who understands their benefit plans, who brings forward their care concerns, who's able to connect them with really the right provider, right time, right care, and that team is available 24/7. This type of support really will follow the member through their personal, medical and pharmaceutical care plan. And in these type of solutions, they're also able to make physicians' appointments for them. This is really care coordination, not treatment or diagnosis. And one of those groups which provides this type of clinical care navigation is Right Way Health, which NFP just recently signed a national agreement with them. And what we've observed is that member satisfaction has grown exponentially over the last 18 months, and we continue to see that continue. Now, as SMEs, as Kim mentioned, each one of us has kind of our own optics on these different type of solutions. So Maria, from an HR perspective, what do you see as important to employers when it pertains to return on value?
Well, as you mentioned, Heidi, employees need help with navigating their benefit plans. There's nothing more frustrating to an employer than offering quality benefits that employees don't utilize. And as Sam mentioned, if benefits are not based on specific employee needs, it may lessen the impact of the offerings. Gauging employees through pulse surveys and working groups really helps employers to target benefits that employees truly need and want. Total compensation statements and a solid communication strategy can also be used to remind employees of the company's offerings and aid in maximizing utilization.
All right. So let's take a little bit different approach. Much of our, kind of the theme, a bit of the theme of our 2022 trend report is meeting employees where they are. And what I'm going to address this time, Deb Smolinski and Kim Heald, our panelists there. What are your perspectives on this, and why is it increasingly important to treat employees as consumers? So, Deb, you go first.
Yeah, Sam nailed it, right? Using that consumer lens allow employers to really focus on the individual's needs versus the collective, and really design and offer more personalized and customized benefits. So as Sam mentioned, consumers purchase things on demand. He said life demand, I think it was true. You need something, you click, and in a moment, It's on your door. That's right. That is really how we have to structure our benefits as well. When my nanny is sick, I just need to click and find backup care right now. when I'm working from home and my furnace goes out and it's 10 below, I need to click on my benefits. And, when they offer that home maintenance as an employer, it's like armadillo. I'm like, great, now I can find somebody to really help me in that moment on demand as that consumer. So that's why it's just really critical. But I know Kim has some additional sites to chime in on.
Yeah, I mean, not to go back to where Sam is, but since Amazon has conditioned the world to be, one giant consumer in the benefit space, we can't ignore that this is happening, right? So we should be giving people the choice they're becoming accustomed to, but make sure that employees aren't overwhelmed with options they don't understand or know how to apply to themselves. So as choice increases, then access to education and decision support needs to increase as well. What we know by using sites like Amazon is that people want access to simplified content and also don't mind recommendations on what to buy. What we don't probably think about is that these recommendations are AI driven, and as much as we may not love that, you ever wonder, like, people are listening on the phone? AI is becoming as ubiquitous as the Apple phone, right? So to that end, we should be using technologies like Naya that are AI driven, with a focus on benefits that help employees make informed decisions in the same way it tells them what to buy on Amazon. And as we meet employees where they are by giving them more choice, employers need to ensure their employees have access to information and decision support that'll help them make smarter decisions.
Yeah, I think that, going back to what Heidi mentioned on the care coordination, there are the solutions that are out there, like a Right Way Health, for example. I mean, they coordinate for everything. So it's kind of I think it becomes, as we sit here and talk about all these solutions, I'm sure that it feels even more overwhelming, the amount of things that you need to implement into programs to, drive value and drive, make yourself an employer of choice. But there are, services out there that help, even at NFP for our own employees. We have so many choices and so many things available, but we forget, we don't know. HR couldn't tell us enough times all the things we have, but if I've got one phone number to call when my nanny calls me and can't come, or whatever it is, those care coordinators can help get you to right places. So, they're wonderful support for HR teams who are really trying to put together an intricate package and make sure, that there's, a good way to communicate that. Okay, well, we're going to shift a little bit more to the employee well-being side of things. And this question is going to be for Deb on the well-being side, Kim Heald on the voluntary side, and Sam. What are your insights on the depth and breadth of the well-being crisis facing today's workforce? And what are some examples of how employers are addressing it the right way? So, Deb?
Yeah, I've seen a mental health question already, and for small groups. So I guess mental health is the crisis at the top of all employers' minds, no matter small, large, what have you. And that's because 100% of your workforce might not have gotten COVID physical symptoms, but 100% of your workforce has experienced some type of mental health symptoms of COVID. And so therefore, it's super critical to move from these free EAP 3-visit models to more of a robust EAP and behavioral health solution with expanded visits and additional options to interact with professionals, like Sam was mentioning, text, chat, in-person, video. That's why Talkspace is really popular, or we see Curelink gaining traction. But in addition, in terms of like complexity and really supporting people in this crisis, I also recommend going beyond those standard EAP solutions to support like the subgroups who are really experiencing the most stress. There are EAPs for parents now, for caregivers, something like Rethink Benefits or Torchlight, which really, those specific populations. So that's kind of my perspective, but Kim, I know you also have additional ideas.
Yeah, I do. As I think about well-being and how voluntary benefits can contribute to the solution, we have to look at financial stress or strength as a part of the entire narrative, right? So how can we think about an employee's well-being if we don't consider where they are financially? And as I was pulling together data for the trend study, I was kind of combing some different data points, and I discovered that 73% of Americans right now rank finances as their number one stress in their life. So the question is, what can we do by way of benefits to take this number down a notch? The fun part for me is that the voluntary space has been around forever and is only getting bigger. And with what Deb mentioned before me, there are benefits that have been around for decades that could be a part of the solution. So for example, if we have, we've seen a huge interest lately in long-term care programs that aren't your traditional standalone policies. And I don't think it's lost on anybody that the standalone long-term care industry is struggling to meet demand. So what we're seeing is an emergence of lifeless long-term care insurers that are developing products that are more affordable and accessible to a much larger employee audience. And like my mom used to say, what's old is new. And so we can't and shouldn't discount traditional plans like critical illness, like hospital indemnity. Both, by the way, saw a huge increase in popularity due to COVID. But, for some, they don't play. You've got some clients that just don't love the traditional model of those types of, kind of financial wellness plans. And so we ask that, people look to some of the reinventions, if you will, right? So there's a company called Brella that is taking the traditional supplemental health plans and reinventing them in a way that may speak to a wider audience, right? People might just like that delivery better. So I'd also like to mention that what we're seeing in this space is an amazing amount of stress on the carriers to get money into the pockets of the policyholders faster and with ease. And the idea there is we don't want people stressed about their finances when they're trying to get through whatever medical ailment they're suffering from. So what's exciting for me is that, yeah, we've been around in the voluntary space forever, but the innovations that are coming forward are really fun and no doubt a significant part of the well-being discussion that we're having.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things. And I think, Deb and Kim, such great insights, right? So I'll take a little bit of a different spin on this one. One of the approaches that I've seen work effectively is around these well-being offerings that actually take a positive approach at just building good habits and rewarding employees for building these healthy lifestyles. And so these typically combine a couple of different things. One is an educational component, health coaching, and then just well-being programs. And then offering rewards that can come by the way of things like financial incentives or gift cards or contributions to employee health savings accounts. So I think that's kind of a different twist that I've seen that just play into a different part of the employee psyche and just bring some value for them as well.
Yeah, and I think I see a couple questions popping up. The name of the vendor Kim Heald was referring to is Brella, Brella. And I think one of the main, takeaways, and maybe this, goes without saying, but, the financial well-being solutions of pre-COVID world, helping you with budgeting and, those kind of things, those are, the things of old. The things of new are to be thought of as life insurance, disability insurance, things that protect your finances, not, and those things all fall into that financial well-being space. All the, the voluntary products that Kim's mentioning, the supplemental health products that help me be able to afford my healthcare when I have a high deductible because it supplements, those out-of-pocket payments. So, this is all about, again, kind of changing your way of thinking. So question for Maria, we're going to, jump just a little bit to, there's a huge amount of information in the trend report as it relates to problems facing today's HR leaders. But Maria, what are the problems as you, lead the practice here nationally and work with all of our teams across the country and the clients that have needs? What do you see as the biggest problems that you hear most frequently about in today's environment?
Well, Kim, employers are really embracing the flexibility and expanded talent pool that comes with having a remote workforce. but there are many challenges associated with hiring and retaining employees remotely. HR practitioners must stay on top of state compliance and employment legislation, particularly as it pertains to taxation, work rules, and state-provided leave benefits. And learning more about how to engage also and lead remote teams requires a lot of training and shifting to a new way of working for the entire organization. We're seeing a lot of employers engaging vendors to help not only with compliance, but also to take a look at compensation and time off benchmarking to really make sure that they're competitive in the marketplace, because talent is such a struggle these days.
Right. Well, I know when you and I have talked, Maria, I mean, even just looking at pay equity and those kind of things in terms of, I mean, I think all employers are seeing, the need to raise, job offers and things like that. We're, losing employees because they get a better job offer. And so I know, just the compensation side of things and, looking to say, are you paying fairly? I know we've seen a huge uptick in just, the work that we do in that space. So
the compensation benchmarking is really taken off.
Right. All right. Well, just a quick shift to cost containment. For many, I mean, the rising cost of healthcare is not a new problem. It's a problem, we've dealt with for some time and will continue to deal with. We're hoping that things like transparency and, some of those kind of, legislations that have come down the pike and, will help with that consumer side of things will be helpful. But, for many, kind of changing your way of thinking. The old way of thinking means when we talk cost containment, lower quality benefits and shifting more expense to the employees. And so Heidi, can you talk to us a little bit about that from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Industry perspective is really changing and shifting in this area. And a lot of that's attributed to all the technological advancements, digital and AI learning tools that makes healthcare data analytics much more reliable. So what we have continued to see, and it's continued to demonstrated, is that cost containment does not mean compromising quality of care. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the point solutions, which each one of us have kind of spoken to, are addressing specific disease states by using some of this technology. And one key use case that I would use, Kim, is crossover health. During the pandemic, they pivoted. Prior to the pandemic, they were a virtual or they were an advanced primary care on-site, near-site type of clinic, and they pivoted to a virtual first, where they offered advanced primary care, musculoskeletal, mental and behavioral health, and they brought much needed improvement and access to members that ultimately improved quality and also reduced costs. So some of these care models are demonstrating savings and demonstrating value in the fact that these health data analytics are validating it. Another area which I'll turn to Nellie a little bit, which is key, which is RX solutions and specialty pharma, which is extremely concerning to most employers because of the abundance of cost. And maybe, Nellie, you can speak to some of the things that you're doing at RX Solutions.
Thank you, Heidi. Well, as you guys understand, the pharmacy industry is ever evolving. There's new high-cost drug approvals that continue to put financial pressures on our employers. Not to mention, employers have more access to information and real-time data than ever before. So they pose the need for out-of-the-box solutions. When we think about cost containment strategies, they've also evolved with the market. And they intend to drive consumerism to protect the rising healthcare costs. From my experience, these solutions don't lower the quality of the benefit, they elevate it. They create opportunities like we've never seen before. So when you think about some opportunities, digital point solutions, as mentioned earlier, care navigation, working with pharma for copay assistance, patient assistance, and as well as international sourcing, all of these are intended to provide measurable outcomes, risk sharing models, financial savings, with the ultimate goal of sustainability, to really lower the cost, help member engagement, and provide long-term outcomes.
All right, thank you, Nellie. I know from a pharmacy perspective, there's a huge amount of solutions available, as you're indicating, and from an NFP perspective, we are talented in all of those. Everything doesn't fit everybody, or every solution won't work for every employer or every employee population, but it's worth taking a look. So let's flip back real quickly to just attracting and retaining talent. Maria, and attracting and retaining top talent is a challenge. I mean, we're all experiencing it. All employers are experiencing it, all sizes, all industries. What's your perspective on the key drivers, and what are the best practice organizations embracing to improve results?
Yeah, so we've all experienced over the past 2 years so much that has just shifted what's important to us as employees. And so, employees expect more than just compensation. In fact, 50% of employees now demand work-life balance, and 43% expect career advancement opportunities from their employers. So employers really need to be intentional about creating employee retention strategies that touch the entire employee life cycle, from the onboarding experience and flexible work arrangements, compensation, training and advancement opportunities. All of these really need to be considered when employers are thinking about their strategies to retain employees. Employers need to take the time to really understand why employees stay with an organization and why they leave. It's really critical right now. This can be achieved by finding out what matters most to the employees through focus groups, surveys, stay interviews, and exit interviews.
Okay. Yeah, it seems it's overwhelming, I'm sure. So, and I think from, the ability to, gather that intelligence and do those assessments, hopefully, that everyone would find that a worthwhile exercise. So let's jump to innovations in benefits. And NFP, we are very serious about innovation here at NFP, and looking at, even from certainly what we consult with employers about, but even internally, we're focused on always improving processes and, better user experiences for our own, employees and for our clients. So on this question, we're gonna touch Deb and Sam. So what are some exciting innovations in the benefit space that are focused on the diversity of challenges facing today's multi-generational workforce? Deb, you want to take that one first?
Sure. Yeah, I think the vendor landscape continues just to explode with innovation options across all generations. Starting with, let's go, family planning solutions like Kindbody, which now offers male and female home fertility kits instead of going to the doctor. Or then go up a little bit, to childcare solutions like We Care, which now expands care to include second and third shift workers, like we saw in the pandemic, or even part-time employees, because they're creating new types of networks and adding flexibility. And then as we get older in the sandwich generation, we have elder care solutions that are now creating these digital vaults so you can put all of that information, doctor's notes, and communicate real time across the community or your family members all at one time. And then, in terms of specialty telemedicine, even for women 45 to 65, there are now amazing menopause specialty telehealth providers like Genève, because 1 in 4 women, are experiencing significant menopause symptoms that can last for up to 14 years during a critical time, in our career. So we're seeing across all generations, vendors just stepping up to continue to innovate. But Sam already gave great examples. I don't know, Sam, do you have some more to share with us?
I think you nailed it, Deb, right? I think you mentioned this explosion of these innovative options. And I think going back to what I mentioned, there's thousands of these new companies that are out there. But I think one of the benefits of this is that there's a solution for nearly every user or patient persona out there, right? So Deb, I think your example is super interesting. I mean, if you look at a woman's life, there are all of these inflection points. So let's just touch on a small sliver: family planning, prenatal support, pregnancy support, postpartum, perimenopause. And so all of these different inflection points that are so critical when it comes to that personal thing of healthcare, there's companies that are out there and there's solutions. And now employers are starting to offer these as benefits. And all of this is coming off the back of employees speaking up and lobbying for some of these offerings, right? And so I think that's really, really critical. And then the other thing I'll kind of mention, and just to plus one what Maria mentioned earlier, as this plethora of these solutions comes up, I think one of the most valuable and highly desired things is just assistance with care navigation and benefits management to really help with that quarterbacking around these inflection points. So, on a patient's journey, there's so much that happens. And frankly, people just aren't equipped with all the, knowledge and know-how on how to navigate that. So I would just say that that's another really critical thing, especially as you think multi-generationally, is how do you have this care navigation, help that can help you kind of figure it out so that you don't have to go it alone.
Right. Yeah, that's so critical. All right. Well, we're getting close to the end. So the last question, and we'll have several people weighing in on this, but just talking a little bit about emerging trends. I mean, we've talked a lot about the last 2 years, and things don't seem to be letting up for employers. That's for sure. I think this evolution, this, Sam, I think we're in early innings of this, and I think it's what we've seen is here to stay. And I think as fast as it feels that we're moving now, we're going to move even faster. I think that's, one thing that came out of COVID is that we have to react quicker. And in the healthcare space, it's certainly proven to be the case. So I want to talk a little bit about what emerging trends should our, listeners be keeping an eye out for, and what can they do about it now? So first we'll jump to Maria on that question.
Well, we've seen so much, and if we've learned anything in the past 2 years in HR, it's really the need to be agile and create a responsive and resilient workforce. One of the trends we are seeing is an accelerated progression in technology and ever expanding employee expectations. And they're actually looking to employers to provide that training on the technology. HR will need to lead with training and take it to a whole new level throughout the organization in years to come. We are also seeing a greater focus on the employee experience, which is already a priority right now. But there will be a greater demand placed on designing, implementing, and maintaining experiences that actually result in positive outcomes. Most importantly, I think HR leaders are going to need to create employee experiences that are aligned with the mission, values, and the purpose of the organization. And the last one I'll just speak about is, and it's been mentioned, of course, is that we're seeing such a trend and a shift in people analytics, which is really going to drive the business impact in the future. HR leaders will be at the forefront of guiding C-suite decisions like never before. The data will be driving the bottom line outcomes, which is going to include significant cost inefficiencies and strategic workforce improvements. I think that HR leaders can really prepare right now by making a strong business case for technology. I know that, it's been difficult for HR leaders to get technology, but this is going to be really, really important. And I think also HR leaders need to become very skilled at determining which data matters most to drive the business forward. Heidi, what are you seeing?
You're muted, Heidi. Heidi?
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
So data is key. Data drives decisions. And so enhancing actionable data through advanced data analytic engines is going to become paramount into the future, because you have to be able to be more proactive in identifying gaps in care and, specialty pharma, and how to design value-based benefit structures with all of their incentives, and then monitoring that and being able to provide predictive modeling to senior leadership as to what's taking place. And now with, CAA, or the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and transparency, we're, positively or cautiously optimistic as to what that may do for us in 2023. But in addition to the data and to the tools to be able to evaluate that data, virtual care in healthcare delivery models are going to increase, and which means that employers are going to feel the pressure of education and improving medical literacy. So all of the solutions that we've kind of brought forward are going to be key, and then being able to use data analytics that is actionable then to be able to monitor and manage and validate and identify outcomes is going to be key.
Nellie?
I have one word for emerging trends is next year, and that's biosimilars. We've all endured the last decade of an influx in specialty spend on biologic agents. When you think about specialty, it's the 1% of utilization that drives that 50 to 60% of your pharmacy spend. Well, in 2023, we will start seeing a bit of a cost reprieve, starting with the patent expiration of the #1 drug in the world, Humira. So having biosimilars for some of the most popular drugs starting in 2023, we'll start to see about a $20 billion savings opportunity, and that will continue in the years to come. So my strategy for you, the takeaway for today, is have these discussions with your groups. Talk about specialty plan designs, a 3-tier specialty plan design, formulary strategies to ensure that there's space to drive consumerism for these new biosimilars coming into the mix.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, we've got one more question, but I think that we're close to time here, and I want to spend a minute or so just addressing kind of next steps. So we again very much appreciate everyone joining us today. As a reward, I guess, for joining us today, you'll get a preview of the trend report. You should receive an email tomorrow, I believe, that'll have both a copy of the trend report, and it will have the recording of this call in case you'd love to listen to it again. And if you're wondering how to spell the word, how to spell Brella or anything like that, you can go back and listen. And we'll have much more information on NFP.com. The official release of the trend report will be on June 1st. So those of you who are on the call today will get, an early bird special of, getting it in your hands ahead of time. The trend report is about 70 pages. It has a huge amount of benchmarking data from plan design to, leave management, PTO policies, all kinds of, what are the trends in voluntary benefits? What are the top benefits that are, being asked for and sold? And so anyway, there's just a huge amount of information in the trend report. So please do take the time to read through it. But again, I think the #1 question I was seeing on the Q&A is, am I going to get a copy of the presentation? And am I going to get a copy of the trend report? So all those things will be made available to you in an email tomorrow. So with that, thank you very much to everyone who's joined. Thank you to the panelists who helped put all this together. A very special thanks, Sam, to you and to Amazon Care for joining us on today's call. And, go forth and strategize.
Thank you to all of our speakers for sharing your valuable time and expertise with us today. At this time, I'd like to take a moment to ask you to take a short survey today. The survey will populate in a new window when you exit out of Zoom. Please take a brief moment to complete this survey, as it lets us know what topics are important to our listeners and helps make our education program as current and relevant as possible. That concludes our webinar for today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great day.